Hoy hoy, he's Straw, I'm Parker, and together we are the Battle Hammer. Shazam. So, today I am going to be going through the Dystopian Wars rulebook that came in the Hunt for Prometheus 2-player starter set. I can't show you every single page in detail because that would take too long. I'm just going to kind of scan through it, point out some things as I go. I'll try and hold pages up. It's very hard for me to get it well lit and not have reflection because the paper's slightly glossy, but I'll do my best. I'm just going to go through the rules. I won't be going through all the fluff and the narrative stuff. I'll either do that in another video or you can enjoy it at your own leisure, because this is all downloadable off the website at the moment, the faction breakdown, what they're all about and stuff. So I guess we begin at the beginning. So there we go. Lovely contents page. We like contents and stuff like that. As I pointed out in the unboxing, there is some cross-referencing in here, which I really like, and a decent index, which I also really like. You know, if you can get into the rulebook and find stuff, just makes the whole play situation a lot easier. So starting with some important terms like what is a model, what is a unit, aerial, ground and skimming units, that kind of thing. Rounding up, you always round up, so even if you're moving, you don't move. If you're moving 7 inches and you have to half your movement, you don't move 3.5, you move 4. Simples. You don't roll half a dice, that kind of thing. Measuring's all in inches, and when you're measuring between things, you're measuring your closest point to your closest point. So in this case, the distance between these two things is going to be the shortest distance between them. Okay, so I'm going to be measuring kind of that distance there, if you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully you can see that just about. So the closest points between them. So no like, oh well you're out of range at the back. No, closest point to closest point. Key thing to be aware of there. Play area, a lot of people have been asking this online. A standard quote unquote game is going to be on a 4x4 table. You can obviously play it smaller or larger depending on how many points you're using, but I imagine if and when we see tournaments, assuming that the world goes back to some kind of normal after COVID and everything, it'll be 4x4 tables. Short range squadrons, I'll go into short range squadrons when I get there. That is these cool little tokens here, which have your little fighters and bombers on them. They don't have separate fighters, separate bombers or anything. They are short range squadrons, and depending on where they are, depends on what they do. Here we've just got an explanation of the dice and, you know, an exploding hit, blah blah blah, what they all mean. So the exploding hit, all the way from a blank, does nothing. The counters counter the hits that you do, and the hits and heavy hits do hits, and the important one is the exploding hit, which is this little symbol here. That does 2 hits, and you can re-roll a new dice and potentially keep exploding forever. So if you roll like 5 dice and you get 3 exploding hits, and then you roll, oh well, I'll add some more dice. Oh, I rolled another exploding hit. Oh, I'll roll another dice. I'll get another exploding hit. Well, I'll keep going. In theory, for infinity. I don't know if you could go on to infinity. I imagine you just stop when the ship gets destroyed and you do that much damage. Anyway. Now, re-rolling dice. This is a thing, and cancelling dice. That's a thing, okay? So I'm just going to quickly go through how re-rolling, cancelling, and exploding works, and the order of operation between them. So, I have here 20 dice in a little dice tray. Let's say I'm making a shooting attack against a bad guy, also known as my Bezzy mate who I'm playing Toy Soldiers with. So we roll the dice, we get a selection of results. So cancelling happens first. Okay, so let's say for example I'm cancelling all of my blanks. Okay, so I'll get rid of all of those blank results. They are cancelled before I do anything else. Okay, then I can do my re-rolls. So Well, these counters count as misses. They don't hit because they weren't doing any hits, so I'm going to re-roll those. I probably wouldn't use a card or whatever to re-roll 2 dice, but I can re-roll them. So I missed with both of them anyway, that's fine, but that's my re-roll done. Now I do exploding hits. So some of those re-rolls could have converted into exploding hits, but now's when I do the exploding hits, so I can't re-roll after this point. Okay, so now I do exploding hits. Oh, I've got another exploding hit there. I did get some misses as well, but I can't use the re-roll on those, okay, because I've gone past that re-roll step. So now I've got another exploding hit, so I can add another dice, and that's a miss. So now in this case, I think I got rid of my exploding hits for some reason because I'm a dummy. But I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because these count as 1, and these count as 2, and the exploding hits count as 2. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 hits. Okay, that's the order of operations when it comes to rolling dice. I hope that makes sense. It's not massively difficult, but you just make sure that you do your cancels first, and I think you continue to cancel any that that come up. Yeah, they can't be re-rolled, and any results from them are ignored. So yeah, so it's cancels, then it's re-rolls, because you can't re-roll cancels, and then it's exploding hits, and you can't re-roll from that point onwards. That should make sense. Hopefully it does. If you're not sure, leave some comments in the comments section, because that's what it's for. I will probably do a how to play video, which is going to go into more detail about shooting and whatnot. Then we've got forces, battlefields and units, so this is all about attributes on a card. That's what a card will look like. You've got various different stats. Kind of going through a few of the main ones, you've got defense, which is your defense against aerial and submerged attacks, speed, which is how fast you move, hull, which is your effectively hit points, damage points that you can take, mass, which is how heavy your ship is, that also is your drift speed, so that's how fast you have to move at the beginning of the turn. Citadel is your critical hit, effectively. You get more hits than that, then you do a critical hit thing. Armour is how many hits you have to do some damage. Turn limit is how many times you can turn in a movement. And then fray is your assaulting. I'll go into guns and stuff when we get to shooting, and I do a proper shooting video. They've got points costs. You spend points on them to do stuff. Okay, so that's that. Oh, and there's special rules which are there on the card. All the cards will be downloadable from the website at some point soon. I don't know exactly when. They're looking into doing it nowish, whether that's within the next week. I don't know if it will be before the new box comes out, as in officially comes out, I don't know. Center point, when you're measuring, for certain things you need the center point, and that is the center of the ship. So in this case, the ship, this is a enlightened cruiser. That's say 4 inches long. So at 2 inches, which is this center point, that's the center point of the ship that you may need for stuff later on for shooting and whatnot. Blah, 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 blah. Coherency is 4 inches if they're in a unit together. Victory points is a thing you get. If there's a sole survivor, i.e. one model left in a unit on its own, it will take disorder condition, which we'll come across later on. And you get extra victory points if you blow up entire squadrons. So if there's 4 frigates and you blow them all up, you get a victory point. Some things are within base contact. There's your firing arcs, 90 degrees forward, port, starboard and aft. So it's all 90 degrees, there's no like narrow direct lines or anything like that. All of your ranges are Point blank is 0 to 10, closing is 10 to 20, long is 20 to 30. Nice and simple, which we like. Line of sight, I will go into line of sight a little bit. So here I've got a ship, here is the short range squadron. You know what, I'm not going to use them. And here's a frigate. Oops, there we go, there's a frigate. Now this frigate wants to shoot at this cruiser. Now, let's say I've got some terrain, like this space of magic. From this point here, I can see the centre point of the ship. Okay? So I'm not obscured. Here, I can see the ship, but I can't see the centre point because this piece of terrain's in the way. Now it counts as obscured. So maybe there's a bigger piece of terrain. Oops. Where I drop stuff all over the floor. There's a bigger piece of terrain like that. I can only see the front of the ship. I can still shoot at the ship, but it counts as obscured because that centre point is covered. Okay. If it's obscured, you count heavy hits you count exploding hits simply as heavy hits. So they don't explode and become more damage. You will just get, if you roll this symbol, you just get 2 hits. You don't get to re-roll the dice. You re-roll another dice and add it to it. So obscuring is quite a big deal. Things like terrain obscure, submerged units count as being obscured from stuff because obviously they're underwater. Excuse me. And I think there are shrouds and stuff like that, weird tech that can obscure your enemies as well. But it does behoove you to kind of, because you can, in this previous scenario, I've got line of sight on him, but I'm also obscured from him. So in this case, this ship can kind of poke around a little bit and do some shooting whilst gaining the cover of the ship. Okay, I think it's from closest point. I'll just double check that. Yes, so I would be fine to shoot at him from here, but when he shoots back, he'll be obscured. Okay, so cover is going to be a thing in the game, which is nice, assuming people put terrain on there. I think that in theory, a lot of ship-to-ship battle is going to be out at sea, but also a lot of it's going to be in the coast where you're vying for control over land assets. So there would be things like sandbars and coral reefs and icebergs and all the fun stuff, because otherwise what's the point? You just stand there and it just makes for a more interesting game. Building a force, all about building your battle fleets. They're going to be releasing this online. Obviously the rules will be available online as well, but basically you pick a faction choice, then you get an Orbat, which is an order of battle, and then you pick battle fleets. If you've played Wild West Exodus, it's effectively picking a faction and then picking posses within that faction. Basically the same thing, but it's list building, like you get in lots of other games. You can pick loads of big stuff, or you can pick loads of little stuff, but you need at least one big thing as a flagship. Generally speaking, you probably want a mix of things, like in most list building in most games. We've got the Victory and Valour cards. If you've played Wild West Exodus, you know pretty much what these do. I'll quickly go through them if you haven't played Wild West Exodus. You've got a deck of 60 cards. There's a couple of examples. You draw a certain amount at the start of the turn, and once on one end they've got a victory condition or a valour condition, and you can use them for one or the other things. Keep those cards secret while you're playing your opponent, and you can decide when you want to use the card. So in this case, the Valour says, reveal this card, discard it any time to gain the following. Gain +2 to your fray attribute for the assault. So maybe I want to assault someone, +2 fray, extra dice in combat, that's good. Or achieve the following at the end of your activation. If one of your mass 3 units or larger is within 5 inches of the centre of the area of a play, score 1 victory point. So maybe I want to hold the centre of the table and get victory points for doing so. You can use one thing or the other thing, then you discard it. You can't use both things. I really like this in Wild West Exodus. I've played this using this system in the demos of this. I think it's a really cool thing. The ability to have a certain amount of sneaky stuff that you can do that your opponent doesn't know. You know, oh, why is he going over there? Oh, he's scoring a victory point. Oh, why is he focusing all of his fire against that other guy? Oh, because he's getting a victory point. Oh, he's no good when he comes over here and does X. Oh, he's re-rolling all of his dice. Oh no! So I think that creates a lot of your nice interest in the game. So that's Victory and Valor. And then you fight an encounter, which is basically a scenario. There are 6 encounters. I'll cover those when I get to them at the back of the book. You can roll randomly, or you can choose. Deployment, you deploy all of your submerge the last. So first you deploy aerial, because they arrive first. Then you deploy your normal ships, because they will follow up. Then you deploy your submerged units, because they'll appear later on. And then you get vanguard moves, potentially, which are like scouting moves at the start of the game. Reserves, important thing about reserves is you can you only reserve a battle fleet. So a battle fleet may consist of a battleship, a couple of cruisers, and a group of frigates, and that will be a battle fleet. And then you might have over here another battleship or a large carrier with some frigates and maybe some air support. Well, you pick the whole battle fleet to be in reserve or not. As the turns go on, you roll dice to see if they come in, and they will come on either on the sides or your opponent's table edge, or any table edge, depending on how you roll. I'm not going to go into all the details, but depending on what you roll, and depending on what stage of the game it is, I think as well, depends where they can come on. But it is definitely worth thinking about reserves, because they're not just, oh, they come on your own table edge. You can kind of outflank your opponents, which is pretty cool. You probably would want, I guess, something pretty fast, so you can affect what part of the table you want to affect, and probably something with heavy damage at close range, because you're probably going to be more likely to get what you want to get. Maybe you want something really tough that can hold that area of the table, depending on what the scenario is. We've got the game round. First you have initiative, which I'll tell you about in a second. Then you do your activations, and it's alternate activation, so I'll activate a unit, you'll activate a unit, I'll activate a unit, you'll activate a unit, unless you spend a Victory and Valor card to interrupt that and potentially activate twice. You move first, then you shoot, then you launch assaults. Or sorry, well, before that you do your short-range squadron tokens. But important, movement, then shooting, then assault. That's the order you do things. I move, then I shoot, and then if I can assault, I'll assault. Probably was going to cover another thing, but I've immediately forgotten it. Oh, and you can pre-measure at any time. That wasn't always in the rules. I know in the beta they'd kind of undernard about it. I like being able to pre-measure personally, because there's nothing worse, and you go, haha, I'm going to do this, and then, oh, come out of range by a centimetre. Oh well, sucks to be me. It's just not a great play experience. I get that for some people, that's part of the fun of like, oh, am I in range? What range am I at? Oh, I don't know. But it can feel a bit bleh. Initiative phase, we go to the Victory and Valor cards. They've got numbers in the top corner. Generally speaking, the ones with the highest numbers do better things, but they also allow you to go first. So they're used for initiative, which is also good. Then, when you activate your units, you launch SRS tokens, which is short-range squadrons, which are, as I've said, these things. Assuming you have any, obviously, in that unit. And rather than in the previous game where they fly around, and then you move them, and then you move them, and they do a thing, they're basically tokens, and you say, right, these carriers are going to harass this ship, or these carriers are going to help this ship. and then you get extra dice for doing various things like assaults, or they can make attack runs and stuff like that at the end of the turn. So it's a lot less paperwork in that regard. You can... They've added a thing for special operations, which is like basically anything in the game you may need to do that doesn't have another thing, so it's not shooting or attacking. You know, like, oh, we need to get this treasure, or, you know, secure this location, or whatever it is. You can do a full reverse, but because obviously people find it a bit confusing, why is a ship going backwards? That's not what they normally do. You get a disorder condition. Reserves we've talked about. Moving, and again, I am going to cover all of this in more detail in individual videos. This is just a kind of an overview. Moving, first of all, a ship will move forward its drift value, which is its mass. So let's say this has got a mass of 2, it will move forward 2 inches before it does anything else. The momentum of this steel behemoth ploughing through the waves will carry it forward 2 inches. Unless you do a full reverse or something like that. Then you can move up to your speed, which is, let's say it's, I don't know, 8 for this. I'll move it back here just so I've got a bit more space to do. Where do I put that thing I need now? So, let's say I've got to move 8 and I want to be kind of over here somewhere. Well, I can move... Oh, you know what? Let's use the thing I've actually got. So I want to move 8. So I'm going to move, let's say 3. So 1, 2, 3. I'm finding the centre point and putting it along here. Now I've got the turning template. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now I'm there facing that direction. That's, without kind of going into any more detail than that, that's how you move ships. You use your turning template, you move forward in inches, and you can wiggle around the board. Obviously now I've lined this guy up for a perfect broadside. Woohoo! Like I say, I'm going to do more detailed things than this at some point in the near to distant future. And then we shoot. As I went through with the dice, you work out your shooting. Essentially, you will have... let's go back to it. How well you're going to be able to see this on the camera, if at all. Hopefully a bit. You'll have a number followed by a number in brackets. You can combine your firepower, much as you did in the previous game. I might have, you know, a gun at the front and a gun at the rear that can both fire sideways. So the gun at the front might be 10-5. As long as the gun at the back has the same stats or same weapon qualities as the gun at the front, they can combine fire. Because it's 10 brackets 5, I get 10 for the first gun and 5 for the second gun, so I roll a total of 15 dice. It's worth combining your firepower if you can, rather than separating your shots out, because the more dice you roll, the higher result you're ultimately going to get, the more likely you are to punch through the armour and do critical hit. Whereas if you say fire 10 then 10, because they count as separate hits, you may well not go through the armour or do the damage that you want to do. Some weapons will be better at combining fire. Some weapons you may end up firing individually depending on the kind of weapon they are. Excuse me. We've got the critical damage dice. If you do a crit, you roll a crit dice, which looks like that. In this case, that's a magazine explosion. There's a big explosion on the ship. It causes a point of damage and a point of damage to everyone within, is it 4 inches? Everyone within 3 inches. If you do another crit, you roll another dice. In this case, that is Stygian flare. I'm forced forward 3 inches, and all the short-range squadrons are knocked out of the sky by electromagnetic radiation, or EMP pulse, or whatever. If I roll the same result, you don't add that to that. you instead cause a catastrophic explosion which does 2 points of damage. This now follows this around until it's repaired, so there will be a critical damage on this cruiser, and then at the end phase of the game we can repair it. That's critical damage just about. Defences. Defences are only used against certain things. Against normal weapons like gunneries and laser beams and stuff like that, you don't get any defences. Your defence is your armour. You're just getting shot at by a ballistic projectile or something equivalent to that, like a laser beam. Your armour will defend against it, hopefully. Defences are against specifically aerial and submerged attacks. So short range squadrons you'll get defences against, torpedoes you'll get defences against, and then you're rolling an opposed roll with the action dice against when your opponent shoots at you, and then your counter results will get rid of its hit results. You've got 1 counter or 2 counters, and you will hopefully prevent some damage. Assault is quite, I wouldn't say it's complicated, but you basically roll a bunch of dice to assault with your fray. Your opponent rolls their defense dice, and depending on what your kind of one minus the other is, you do a certain amount of damage or critical conditions or disorder or whatever it is. There's a little chart just there. Then in the end phase, that's when all of everything's activated. Right, end phase it is. You do your short range squadron resolution. So they'll either move on to new targets if stuff's been blown up. They'll scramble to intercept opponents' short range squadrons, and then they'll make an attack run and potentially do damage. And then you can repair things. Let's say we still had this magazine explosion. End phase, I want to get rid of that. I roll an amount of action dice equal to my mass. Yep. And for every counter, I can remove a critical. So in this case, I've rolled 1 counter, I've got a critical there, I can fix that. If I didn't roll anything, I rolled a blank or I rolled hits or whatever, I could spend a point of damage to remove that by effectively I've jury-rigged it, or I've fixed the leak or the magazine explosion, but I've used a bit of the ship to do so. So probably might be worth doing, might not be. You know, these are the decisions that an admiral, commandant, no, commodore, whatever, has to make. That's that. And then there's like a maintenance phase at the end of the term where, we'll just tidy everything up. And then you begin a new round. Disorder, as I mentioned earlier on, there are various times when you get a disorder condition. I think it's when you take critical damage, or various other weapons will do it. They'll do like a disorder condition or something like that. And there are 3 levels of disorder. Hazard, where basically, that's not nice, but nothing's going wrong. Emergency, when people start panicking a little bit. And then you can't make ramming actions, and you can't support weapons between a unit. So 2 cruisers couldn't combine their firepower. And then there's chaos and disarray, where you can't ram, you can't support weapons in your own ship, so this front gun wouldn't be able to combine with this rear gun. And you've got navigation lock, you can only go in a straight line because everyone's running about panicking and someone might be on fire. That's not great. So that's disorder conditions, and again I will cover a lot of this in more detail moving forward as I do various how to play videos. This is just going through the rulebook and showing you some stuff I found. But you only have levels of disorder, so you go from hazard to emergency to chaos and disarray. You can't be hazarded and chaos and disarray but not emergency. It's one of those 3 options as they get progressively worse. There are rules for collisions and ramming. You know, collisions are unintentional, ramming is, Ramming speed, Mr. Sulu, perhaps today is a good day to die, all of that kind of stuff. You do damage to your opponent, but you also take some damage because you've hit a ship with another ship. They're not generally designed to do that. Short-range squadrons I'm not going to cover here massively. Just as I was saying earlier on, they're tokens. You put them on things within, generally speaking, within 20 inches. You can save them and then put them anywhere on the table should you want to. That's the whole thing about long-range sorties. But generally speaking, you put them out there when you activate, and at the end of the round they have an effect on whatever they're near, whether that be supporting them or doing an attack run on an opponent. I love carriers. I don't know why in any game. I'm just a big fan of carriers and having fighters, probably from, you know, growing up with Star Wars, where you'd have, you know, the old, you know, Star Destroyers, and you get the TIE fighters flying around, you get the big capital ships, and you get the little fighters whizzing around, and so I love all that sort of stuff. Just my jam. Escorts. This is a thing that wasn't in the demo game that I was aware of. We haven't seen any models for them yet. Really interested to see how these will be released. Whether they'll be tokens, whether they'll be, because they're not frigates. They're smaller than frigates as far as I can tell. Essentially, they are. I'll use this frigate as an example. They are ships, but they have a parent unit. So in this case, we've got the cruiser here, and we'll have this frigate as, we're using it as an escort for now. The frigate will move and do whatever it does, and I'll use the template and move properly. End of it, I'll put the escort near it within 3 inches. It will just be there. It's kind of a token rather than an actual ship. Whichever way this finishes, I then go, where do I want this to be? Within 3 inches, facing the same direction. Job's a good one. They provide defences to the parent ship. They don't shoot on their own, they don't attack on their own, they don't assault on their own, they don't move on their own. They essentially provide defences to the main parent ship. So if this cruiser was being attacked by this short-range squadron and it had an escort, it would get +1 dice. +1 dice? +1 to the defence value, yeah. These can get taken out. There's various rules to do that. You can shoot them like normal, or you just fight this, you know, whatever. There are also corvettes, which are basically the same, but you get +1 to assault as well. Oh, and they're massed 3 or ships or larger. So you're looking at battleship-sized ships, not cruiser-sized ships. There's the play area, so there's various rules for impassable terrain, treacherous water. You halve your movement, or you can choose not to halve your movement, but you might take damage. Obstacles, so when you crash into things, you take damage from that. Then we've got generators. Generators are a whole thing. At the moment, there are 6 types of... 6? Count them. 6 types of generator. I think there's going to be more for individual factions, but there are 6 general types, and they all do different things. They either replace heavy gun batteries, or certain ships will come with them. There is a generator ship for the Enlightened where you have 3 generators. I don't know if you have to pay for them or what. We haven't had those that list building stuff out yet. But they do things like the atomic generator adds +2 speed and +1 to its citadel because of the reinforced superstructure. However, if the model suffers an additional point of damage whenever it receives a reactor leak. A shield generator removes 2 action dice from the dice pool of its attack against it, as you've got this kind of shield. Various things that they do. And then you've got all the weapon qualities, so all of the weapons have various qualities, so perhaps it's a gunnery weapon, which is your standard, you know, boat guns, ship guns, you know, like the big cannons that you'll see on them. Which means that quality models with a mass of 1 count as being obscured because they're better for shooting at big targets than small targets. They all do different things. The important thing is the weapon qualities have to all match. So if you've got a gun on the front which has got bomb or let's say devastating, and gunnery, and the gun at the back only has gunnery but not devastating, they cannot combine. They have to have complete matching sets of weapon qualities, or matching no weapon qualities. There's hazardous, where you gain a disorder condition. They all do various things. Again, I won't go into the details until we play. Then we've got the common encounters. A lot of people have been interested in these. The first one is Fog of War, where you, at the end of each round, each player scores 2 victory points for each quarter on the enemy side of the play area that has one or more of their units completely within it, with no enemy models completely within the same quarter. So you're looking at capturing your opponent's table quarters, and they're trying to capture yours. And at the end of the encounter, you score 5 victory points for each one. All models are considered to be obscured at all times while the fog covers the play area. At the start of every round, the player with initiative rolls a number of action dice equal to the round number. If 2 or more dice have the same result once the dice are rolled, the fog is lifted and no longer has an effect on the game. So it's that kind of slow build up as you peek through the fog and you see your enemy try and take their table quarters. Second one is Hold at all costs. At the end of each counter, each player scores 2 victory points for each unit they have in their opponent's deployment zone. If there are no enemy models within 10 inches of that unit, they score 3 victory points instead. So do you push your stuff into your opponent's deployment zone, or do you try and defend your own? Or a bit of both. So it's all about deployment zones. Salvage rights, which is this one here. Each player takes 3 small debris markers, approximately 1 inch in diameter. I will be at some point making, I've got some of these small bases for Wild West Exodus, which is another game that Warcradle will make. They are approximately 1 inch in diameter, so I'll be turning these into some debris markers at some point. Each player takes 3, and you take turns placing them on the play area no closer than 6 inches to an edge, deployment zone, or another token. If you're within 1 inch at the start of an activation, you can make a single attempt to search. Roll an action die on a blank, heavy counter, or counter. There's nothing. On any hit result, it's a salvage token, you score 2 victory points. Once 3 salvage tokens are uncovered, remove all other debris tokens from the play area. If you've played Wild West Exodus, this is pretty much the same as one of the scenarios in Wild West Exodus, where you place objective markers and you try and search them. Oil fields, you have different, these skulls represent large objective markers, which are approximately 2 by 2. I've got somewhere a large base here. I'll be getting another large base at some point, and doing something with these as objective markers, so they'd have little oil rigs on them, that kind of thing. That'd be cool. So I imagine they might release stuff in the future. I don't know whether they'll release terrain. I assume they will. But yeah, so you place 2 of those on the places that's suggested. And at the end of the round, if you have a unit within 3 inches of the oil platform on your side, you gain 2 victory points. If it's within 3 inches of your opponent's oil platform, you gain 4 victory points. So you're trying to hold these 2 objectives. Rule the waves. At the end of phase of each round, each player scores 2 victory points for each quarter on the enemy side. It has 1 or more units and no units. So it's another table quarters, but slightly different to the first one, I believe. There's no Fog of War for a start. I think it's slightly different in points. The Tempest is the last one, and you're trying to be within 12 inches of the centre of the play area. At the end of the game, score 5 victory points for each unit that has a model within 12 inches of the centre of the play area. Special rules: while the storm rages, drift is doubled for all models. So earlier on, when he moved 2 inches at the start of his turn, he would have to move 4 inches instead. When a unit activates within 12 inches of the centre of the play area, roll a critical damage dice. If it's Siginian Flare, resolve that against the ship as they are struck by lightning. Nice. At the start of every round, the player with initiative rolls a number of action dice equal to the round number. If 2 or more dice have the same result, the storm is lifted, similar to the Fog of War. So you don't want to be at the centre at the start of the game, because you might get struck by lightning. But at the end of the game, you score victory points for it. So, bundle! And then you've got some lovely artwork, and there's the fluff. And that is a brief rundown. Obviously, I was jabbering on. If you've got questions, leave them in the comments down below, or engage with the Battle Hammer. You can follow me at Vitruvian Goblin on Twitter, so you can chat with me there if you want to. You can at me, as I believe the youth like to say. But yeah, leave comments in the doobly-doo. I know I've been rabbiting on a lot, but I didn't want this to be too long a video, and I did want to get as much information as I could across to you guys. I hope it's okay. If it wasn't, then don't be afraid to leave a comment. I will be covering various parts of the game in more detail, like moving, shooting, whatever. I'll do some, literal examples when I get cards and stuff like that. That'll be in the coming week or two, as I paint models and stuff like that. There'll be plenty more Dystopian Wars content on the channel, as I paint the enlightened ships and build them and stuff. If you want to help out the channel, we've got various things you can do in the doobly-doo below. We've got a Ko-fi page, we've got a Patreon account, we've got an Amazon wish list, we've got affiliate links and stuff like that. We'd really appreciate it. We don't do it for the money, but it takes money to do it, as someone wisely said once about something. If you do nothing else though, and you just think, oh, you know what, these guys are alright, you do nothing else, make sure that you don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked it and want to subscribe. If you don't like it and don't want to subscribe, you don't have to like and subscribe, but we would like it if you liked and subscribed. And until next time, stay hammered. Do 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 do.